Hey y'all, what's up? Jared Hoffman here with another edition of the Better Than Less Than podcast. A much shorter countdown than you usually used to seeing. And that's because I'm wasting my time saying this, but I have a long night ahead of me. So this is going to be a much shorter show than you used to getting. But I had to come on and be like, I can't not do a show this week. We got to get that Division II coverage in. So appreciate everyone who is joining or who will be joining soon. If you can, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the HBCU Sports YouTube channel. You know the drill. Follow us on all of our social platforms and go to hbcusports.com for all the latest news in sports. We ain't got time to waste, so let's get right into it. Last week it was a battle of the undefeateds between Albany State and Benedict, and Albany State came out unscathed as they come away with a 31-3 win. And what was the return of quarterback Isaiah Knowles? Isaiah Knowles, star quarterback for Albany State, had the Albany State offense looking virtually unstoppable through the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, where it's averaging 50 points a game for Albany State before he went down with an injury against Allen. And I believe that was their fourth game of the season. Missed the next 3 weeks, and Albany State was able to keep its head above water, getting wins in each of the contests without Isaiah Knowles in the lineup. Went through a couple of quarterbacks in the interim, but Isaiah Knowles made his triumphant return in this one to keep the Albany State's unbeaten record alive in the SIAC. And now, as you see in the title, the SIAC runs through Albany State. Isaiah Knowles finished the game with 294 on the passing numbers, 22 of 37 passing, 3 touchdowns in the game. So no signs of rust whatsoever from Isaiah Knowles. The running game was still in effect, even with Isaiah Knowles in the lineup. Tyant Weiss, Tion. I apologize, sir, if I've been saying your name wrong this whole time. I need to get a correction on the pronunciation of his name. But has 75 rushing yards on 10 attempts and a touchdown. Algernon Thomas has 64 yards on 13 attempts. And Javion Jackson was the leading receiver, 73 yards on 6 receptions. And then Corey Petty had 52 yards on 3 receptions and a touchdown. But Albany State gets a big win. Hands Benedict its first loss of the season. Benedict had been 7-0 heading into this game, and could have potentially clinched a spot. Came one game closer to clinching a spot. They wouldn't have immediately clinched the spot, But Benedict, their bid for an unbeaten season is over. Their SIAC championship hopes are not dead, though. They still have hopes of an SIAC championship berth. They're going to have to win out and hope that Kentucky State slips up in its last 2 games. But Benedict not out of the woods yet. They still have a chance. They could potentially clinch this rematch with Albany State in a couple of weeks in the SIAC championship game. But as for now, Albany State controls its destiny. They go into a matchup with Savannah State with a chance to clinch a spot in the SIAC championship game. It's winner get in for Albany State this weekend. Benedict, they go away from conference competition this week. They go against who our colleague Chris Stevens calls the Washington Generals of Black college football, Virginia University Lynchburg, for its homecoming. And then they get back into conference competition in the final week of the season against Savannah State. And in that game, it'll be an opportunity for Benedict to clinch its spot in the SIAC championship game. But it might not get that far because Kentucky State, they go up against Clark Atlanta this weekend. And if Kentucky State loses that game, then Benedict will pretty much clinch its spot in the SIAC championship game. But still a lot to play for Benedict, despite the loss. But Albany State, I've been saying this all season. If they have a healthy lineup, if Isaiah Knowles is in this lineup, no team is beating them. They are the most complete team in the SIAC. Benedict, through the first 9 weeks of the season, looked fantastic. That defense, they started the season hot, getting 2 straight shutout wins, and the offense gradually got better. Inserting Darius Ocean into the starting lineup as the starting quarterback, was a great touch to improve the offense. But I said it on the show on Friday. Like if Isaiah knows it's even 60%, I didn't think that there was a chance of Albany State losing that game. Isaiah knows brings something to this offense that it just makes them unstoppable. His accuracy, his ability to keep plays alive. His vision. He has great playmaking ability, and it with the running game being able to develop in those games that he was out, it just makes their offense that much more unstoppable because you never know what they're going to do on offense. They can run the ball, they can pass the ball, they can put guys in different positions and be effective no matter what. So I have a tough time believing anybody is going to beat Albany State with a chance to win the SIAC championship, considering they've already beaten the two teams that they are up against in the running for the SIAC championship berth. They already beat Benedict. They beat Kentucky State 49-21 earlier this season. So they're two teams they could potentially face in the SIAC championship game. They've already beaten them. Now it's hard to beat a team twice in a season. Absolutely it is. But as convincingly as Albany State beat these two teams, like I have a hard time believing that there's a significant level of adjustments that could be made that will, that either of those teams can dethrone Albany State from the top of the mountain. But we just have to see how it plays out. As I said, Albany State has a chance to clinch a spot in the SIC championship game this weekend in their home finale against Savannah State. Benedict will be playing the Washington Generals of Black College Football, Virginia University Lynchburg for their homecoming. And Kentucky State looks to keep its SIC championship hopes alive when they go up against Clark Atlanta. I'm not sure if that's a home or an away game, but no. It's in Kentucky. It's in Frankfurt. So yeah, they host Clark Atlanta for with a chance to clinch a spot, not clinch a spot, but keep its SIC championship hopes alive. And then if Kentucky State wins this weekend against Clark Atlanta, then it'll be Kentucky State and Lane in the final week, and then it'll be Benedict and Savannah State in the final week. Benedict wins, they're in. If Benedict loses and Kentucky State wins, they're in. So, there's still an opportunity. Also, I forgot to bring up, there's an opportunity that Albany State falls out of the SIAC championship picture. They lose these final 2 weeks, they're done. They lose these final 2 weeks, Kentucky State and Benedict went out. It'll be Kentucky State and Benedict in the SIAC championship game. And as wild as the SIAC is, that's not impossible. Considering the last time Albany State lost a conference game, it was against Savannah State. So there is a possibility that Savannah State could play spoiler. And then in the final week of the season, Albany State has Fort Valley State in the Fountain City Classic. Now, last year, remember, Fort Valley State needed a win in the final week of the season to get into the SIC championship game, and Albany State played spoiler. Wouldn't it be something if Fort Valley State, who has been playing a lot better in recent weeks, if they were to play spoiler in that scenario to Albany State and keep them out of the SIAC championship game? That's why I say, man, the SIAC, you're never going to be short on excitement when you're following the SIAC. So be in tune this weekend as those games are going down. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to all the action. All right, let's turn our attention to the CIAA, as we have had a pretty much the pecking order remains the same in the CIAA. We're going to start with with Fayetteville State, who got a big win over Shaw this past weekend. Went on the road and came away with a 31-13 win. Fayetteville State keeps its unbeaten record intact, and yeah, they are a win away from an CIAA championship berth. We're talking about the game that they could potentially clinch that berth in a second, but just to talk about the game real quick, Damari Daniels had One of his better games of the season, 18 to 30 passing, 219 with 2 touchdowns. Also had 81 rushing yards on 10 attempts. Caden Davis, the leading receiver, had 6 receptions for 73 yards, while Unique Kelly had 4 receptions for 73 yards and a touchdown. But the star of the game as it always has been this season, was the defense. Forced 5 turnovers in this game. This was a turnover heavy game. There was a combined 9 turnovers from in this game from both sides. Just sloppy play throughout. There was not the cleanest game by any means, but the Fayetteville State defense continues to play well. Got 2 sacks in this game, forced 5 turnovers. Joseph Woodard was the biggest performer of the game. Had 2 sacks and 2 tackles for loss. Had a forced fumble and a fumble recovery. So he was just all over the field for Fayetteville State. Keyshawn Monk had a interception in this one. This Fayetteville State defense, they are playing as advertised. They started the season playing this well, and they have continued to be consistent, in the way that they play. And now the offense is starting to come on. Damari Daniels in the Fayetteville State offense had one of its better outings of the season, and they're going to need it, depending on who they could potentially face if they were to make it to that. They're going to need it this weekend for sure. They're going to need it this weekend for sure, because they got a high-powered offense coming into town. But Fayetteville State, they continue to make me look dumber by the week, for saying that this is going to be another down year for them. Last year they finished the year 4-6, had their CIAA championship streak ended, and they have an opportunity to start a new one with a win this weekend. So just props to Richard Hayes for getting his team in the right mind frame. I can't imagine that last season was fun for them by any means. Being so used to playing in the CIAA championship game, and then now you're have to get used to losing. Hold on a second. I can't close it. All right. They got the Tommy Hilfiger ad. We ain't sponsoring them, but Fayetteville State. Yeah, they're just having a great season, and I see them being a significant test for whoever it is if they are able to get to the CIAA championship game. One of the teams they could potentially face in that CIAA championship game is Virginia Union. And as we come back full screen, Virginia Union got a win this weekend to remain unbeaten in conference as well. And they beat up on a team that is very near and dear to my heart, my alma mater, Bowie State. They get a 24-7 win, and now they are a win away from a CIAA championship berth. Curtis Allen had an off night, had 198 rushing yards on 30 attempts. Very off performance by his standards. I'm kidding, of course. That is insane. And technically, it is an off night by his standards, because 3 of the last 4 games he had rushed for over 200 yards. All he gets in this one is 198. So Curtis Allen continues to widen the gap between him and the second place finisher for the CIAA Player of the Year, because he's getting that award. It shouldn't even be a question at this point. Curtis Allen just has been, I don't even know if dominant is a strong enough word to describe how he's been this season. He has played spectacular. 1578. That's how many rushing yards he has this season. He has 2 games left in the regular season, potentially a CIAA championship game and possibly a Division II playoff game, in which he can surpass the single season school record for rushing yards set by Jada Byers last year. I don't even know if you could put into words how great he has been. You know, you saw signs of what Curtis Allen can potentially do a couple of years ago when Jada Byers went down with an injury, and he stepped in for those 2 games and combined for 306 rushing yards in those 2 games that Jada Byers was out. And when I talked to Virginia Union associate head coach Diego Ryland, he talked about how all his running backs, he gives them all first team reps so that they're prepared when the moment is brought to them. You know, we've seen running backs like Rashard Jackson, who a lot of people may not know, but he's a guy, Jerome James and Trayvon Tinsley. He talks about how those guys prepare for during the week and get those first team reps. And when they get in the game, they run like it's going to be their last carry. And that's how Curtis Allen, every single time he gets the ball, it's like he doesn't feel like he's going to get the ball again. And it's paid dividends for him. He has Virginia Union a win away from going to their 3rd straight CIAA championship game. And I'd be hard pressed to see anybody else challenging him for the CIAA Player of the Year. And for my money, he is the Deacon Jones Trophy winner. As of right now, he would get my vote for the Deacon Jones Trophy. To me, there's not a player in Black college football who has been as dominant as Curtis Allen. So if I had my vote, it would go to Curtis Allen, you know. And yeah, but shout out to RJ Rosales as well. Had 2 touchdowns in this game, 138 passing. You know, the balance in passing game is going to be the key in the Division II playoffs. That's why the team that I'm about to talk about is one that I see having potential to replicate the success of. And I'm going to talk about the regional rankings that were recently released in a second. But yeah, we got some teams that can do some damage in the Division II playoffs because the balance in offense it's the tide has changed. You know, we were once at the Division II level. We were once the programs that had to establish the running game. You know, you look at the great teams of the past. You know, Winston-Salem State was one of the few at the time that was dominant on both sides that could do the run and that can run and pass. You know, Tuskegee a couple of years ago, when I believe, what was it, Peyton Ramsey a couple of years ago, and well, not a couple of years ago, 10 years ago. You know, when they made their Division II playoff run, Bowie, when they had Jerome Johnson, and then they had Jesus, Lord have mercy, I forget that running back's name every single time. But you know, we had a balanced offense when we made our run, and last year, you know, Virginia Union got the passing game going, you know, in addition to Jada Byers in the run game, and they were able to make their run. So we got a lot of teams that have, you know, followed in that mold and, you know, established not just the run game, but the pass game. And I can see that paying dividends, you know, come postseason play. So yeah, Virginia Union, they have Bluefield State this weekend, and simple scenario, they win, they're in, you know. And Fayetteville State also has that scenario, but they have a much tougher task on their hand. And that is because they are going up against Johnson C. Smith, who just came away with a pretty dominant win against Winston-Salem State. And I'll get that up in a second. And here we go. WSSU Ram Nation, I'm not sure if you're going to see this video, but you guaranteed your team a win last week during last week's stream, and unfortunately they just did not follow up, as Johnson C. Smith offense was just too much, and they came away with a 52-27 win. They showed some fight in that 4th quarter, put up 21 points, but it just wasn't enough. Kelvin Durham had a pretty strong, a very strong performance. 351 pass on 351 on 22 or 30 passing, scored 3 touchdowns in the game. The run game was there. Bobby Smith ran for a season high 102 and 2 touchdowns. Kelvin Durham also had 74 rushing yards on 6 attempts and 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Proctor and Brian Lane continue to be a dynamic duo in the receiving game, combined for 18 receptions for 263 and 3 touchdowns. All right. This offense has is going to be a tough. It's going to be tough for Fayetteville State this weekend. I know that the last year it was supposed to be tough for Fayetteville State, and they shut them out. But to me, I don't know how to call this game. I don't know how to call this game because Johnson C. Smith's offense is playing incredible right now. This passing game is so fluid and so cohesive. But I can't count out Fayetteville State when they have just been Johnson C. Smith kryptonite. I can't even remember the last time Johnson C. Smith beat Fayetteville State. Let's look it up to see because I can't remember the last time it happened. Like that has lost 8 straight. They have not beaten Johnson C. Smith has not beaten Fayetteville State since 2015. Keep in mind that predates when their CIAA championship streak started. So, like that, if they couldn't beat Fayetteville State in a down year last year, I don't know how to predict how they're going to do this time around when this is a much better Fayetteville State team this year than it was last year. Granted, it's a much different. Both teams are very different. Last year, Johnson C. Smith had Darius Ocean on offense. Their running back from that team is now a linebacker this time. So, and they had really one receiving threat in Brevin Caldwell. Now Johnson C. Smith has Kelvin Durham, who is willing and dealing, and they have 2 receiving threats now in DeAndre Proctor and Brian Lane. So the makeup of both teams is much different. So I could see Johnson C. Smith faring much better this time around than they did last year. I definitely don't see a shutout. If Johnson C. Smith gets shut out this year, and by the way, a loss in this game would eliminate Johnson C. Smith from CIAA championship contention, and it'll be Virginia Union and Fayetteville State in the CIAA championship game. But the makeup of Johnson C. Smith is much different, so I can see them being better this time around, but I don't know, man. Fayetteville State just seems to have their number. It just seems like Fayetteville State, that's a hurdle that they just can't get over. And Johnson C. Smith cannot afford to miss out on another CIAA championship game because I don't know how many opportunities they're going to get. This is the best opportunity they have had since last year to get to the CIAA championship game. They cannot mess this up because it's not guaranteed that you're going to be in this position again. There's not a guarantee that Maurice Flowers is going to be here next year. So you really don't want to miss out on that opportunity because if Maurice Flowers is out the door, more than likely you're rebuilding. You're going back to rebuilding, and you got to go from the ground up like you had been before you went on this run in 2022 or 2023. I don't know. But anyway, so this is a must win for Johnson C. Smith to keep itself in the championship contention against a team that they have not had success against at all. So we'll see how that plays out, but a little bit more cut and dry for Virginia Union, who simply have to beat Bluefield State. But Bluefield State, that's not a gimme. We've seen Bluefield State play well in conference play. Nearly got a win against Virginia State. I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, but so both the Division Twos, we're fully in championship mode. These final 2 weeks, we could find out a lot about the championship picture. And strap on your seatbelts because it's going to be a wild ride. All right. So the final topic that we are going to get to is the NCAA has released its regional rankings, and it has a wealth of HBCU programs in the mix as we pull that up right here. So I had to cut out a little bit to be able to fit both into this graphic, but Super Region 1 featuring the CIAA and Super Region 2 featuring the SIAC, we have a total of 7 HBCUs in the mix. Starting with Super Region 1. And by the way, it's broken up. So for those who don't know, the super regional rankings are comprised of your division record against Division 2 opponents and your regional record. So games against um, games against the FCS opponents are not taken into account. So Fayetteville State's game against North Carolina Central is not taken into account. Kentucky State's game against Grambling State, although they performed pretty well in that game, not taken into account. Same thing with Edward Waters' game against Bethune-Cookman, and the same thing as Albany State's game against Florida A&M. So how it's broken down is, and don't worry about the words blocking some of the teams. Those aren't HBCUs that we're blocking. So starting with Super Region 1, Fayetteville State comes in at 4th. They are currently 5-2 overall in Division 2 and 5-2 in region. And Johnson C. Smith, despite having a loss against Virginia Union on its record, they are ahead in 7th in the Super Region 1 rankings, 7-1 against Division 2 opponents, and 7-1 in region. Ironically, that one loss is against Virginia Union. So interesting that they have them ahead of them. But and Virginia Union is 7-1 overall in Division 2, and 7-1 in region, which is confusing because their loss is to Edward Waters. And Edward Waters is in the Super Region 2 rankings. So I don't know why that factors into their ranking. I don't know why that they put that as a part of their in-region ranking when Edward Waters is not in the same region as Edward Waters is literally the number 14 in Super Region 2. So I don't understand why the rankings reflect that as a part of their in-region record, but it is what it is, So based on these rankings, it's looking like Johnson C. Smith and Virginia Union are going to have to win the conference in order for them to get a spot in the Division 2 playoffs. Fayetteville State looks like they have the best opportunity to get an at-large bid if they weren't to win it. Of course, they're going to focus on winning the conference so they don't have to worry about, if there's going to be a at-large bid, if they are in contention for an at-large bid. But yeah, and then in Super Region 2, at the top of the region, it's Albany State. So if that were to hold, they would get a first-round bye in the Division 2 playoffs. Second is the team that they just beat, Benedict. 4th in the rankings is Edward Waters. Surprising that they're ahead of Kentucky State, considering Kentucky State has an opportunity to. Well, I guess it's because they don't have. I guess it's because of the strength of schedule. Get that Edward Waters' win over Virginia Union probably weighs them over Kentucky State, so I understand that. But 5th in the rankings is Kentucky State, who is 6-1 in Division 2 and 5-1 in region. So yeah, that's huge. That is huge to have 4 teams in the top 5 in the SIAC in Super Region 2. That's huge that we could potentially have 4 teams in the Division 2 playoffs. I don't see it playing out like that, because of course we have conference championships that come around. So barring any of the remaining teams in Super Region 2 getting upset in conference championship games and someone coming from outside these rankings to beat one of those teams, I don't see there being 4 SIAC teams in the Division 2 playoffs, nor do I see 3 CIAA teams being in the Division 2 playoffs. Like I said, unless there are upsets in the conference championships with one of these teams who are in the rankings losing their conference championship. But yeah, it just shows the level of competition that we have in the CIAA and the SIAC, that we have all these teams in these regional rankings and potentially in line for not only conference championship berths, but Division 2 playoff berths. So yeah, we'll see how that all shakes out. I'm pretty sure these are going to change significantly particularly in Super Region 1 when Fayetteville State beats Johnson C. Smith. A win for Johnson C. Smith would be huge for their Division II playoff aspirations and their CIAA, of course, their CIAA championship dreams are on the line. But a loss for Johnson C. Smith would, I'm pretty sure, dropped them out the rankings. Fayetteville State might climb the rankings with a win over Johnson C. Smith because that would be the first time that they have beaten a team currently ranked all season. This is their only opportunity to beat a team that is in position for a Division II playoff berth. So a key game for both teams, not only for their CIAA championship hopes, but their Division II playoff hopes. Virginia Union, all they can do is win out and win the CIAA championship game to get in for, because their last two games aren't strong enough to really strengthen their case to rise in the rankings. They have Bluefield State and Virginia State. Both teams either having losing records or middle of the pack records. So, and then in the SIAC and Super Region 2, I don't see much changing from these rankings unless any of these teams lose, of course, because if any of these teams lose, then I'm pretty sure that'll drop them completely, especially Edward Waters, who already has a loss to who did they lose to? Albany. Did they lose it? No, they lost to Benedict, and they lost to someone else. Kentucky State. They already have that, and that's another reason why I was surprised they are ahead of Kentucky State, because they have a win over Kentucky State already this season. But yeah, so these were the first regional rankings for division by the NCAA for Division II this season. We'll see how those change after the result of this weekend. So to recap, Albany State has a chance to clinch a spot in the SIAC championship game with a win over Savannah State this weekend. Kentucky State needs a win over Clark Atlanta to keep its hopes of an SIAC championship berth alive. Should Albany State lose and Kentucky State win, then it'll be Albany State in a winner-go-home game. Well, not a winner-go-home, but a win, needing a win to get into the SIAC championship game. If Albany State was to lose in the final week, and Kentucky State and Benedict each win in the final week, then it'll be Benedict and Kentucky State in the SIAC championship game. If Albany State wins, then they'll just wait for Benedict, who, if they win in the final week, it'll be Albany State versus Benedict in the SIAC championship game. If Benedict loses and Kentucky State wins in the final week, then it'll be Albany State and Kentucky State in the SIAC championship game. Everybody got all that? Now let's move to the CIAA. Simply put, Virginia Union and Fayetteville State need wins. They do. They're in a CIAA championship game. If Virginia Union and Fayetteville State were to lose, then it'll be a three-way tie in the CIAA standings, and it'll be Virginia Union with the advantage in that one. If Virginia Union were to win, they're in. If Johnson C. Smith wins in a scenario where Fayetteville State loses, their head-to-head matchup this weekend, then it'll be Virginia Union and Johnson C. Smith in the CIAA championship game. If the scenario where Fayetteville State loses to Johnson C. Smith remains the same, and in the final week Johnson C. Smith loses and then Fayetteville State wins, then it'll be Virginia Union and Fayetteville State in the CIAA championship game. Are you not entertained? Are you not excited for championship season in Division II HBCU football? We are in the twilight of the HBCU football season, which is unfortunate, but we are getting to the games that really matter, and we are getting to the fever pitch of the HBCU football season. Looking forward to see all the action this weekend, and I hope you guys will be watching. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know this was a much shorter show than you're used to getting. I'm pretty sure I packed a lot of information into this at one time. Hopefully it was digestible, and everybody, the moral of the story is be excited for the final week of the season, because that we are on the countdown to championship season, and that's really all that matters. But please Like, comment, and subscribe to the HBCU Sports YouTube channel. Follow us on all of our social platforms. Just search up HBCU Sports on all of them, and we will be there. And you can always go to hbcusports.com for all the latest news in HBCU sports. Until next time, I am Jared Hoffman. See you guys.